Age
but
is just a number. You are young at heart.
but I am also a student, so
Of course, all of us are.
You're a much more experienced student than
that
everybody else.
that's all. Still learning.
Right, right. So yeah, so as you've heard about him, you could also guess what sort of knowledge he brings and what is in store for us for the next 1 hour, right? So he wants to make this a very interactive session. So we request all of you to interact whenever he says, but still maintain the decorum of the quorum, and let's have a rocking session today. Okay. So Mansa-san, do you want to give the details of how the next 1 hour is going to be to the students?
Okay, yes. So first we'll just have a small introduction about Sakura Nihongo Resource Center. That's our institute. And post that, we'll have a small talk by Sir. And then after that, we'll have a small Q&A session at post his talk. So you may ask him any questions or any doubts that you have based on whatever he speaks. So we'll be able to take a minimum of 10 questions, considering time permits. And once he finishes his talk, there's a hand raise option. So please raise your hand. I'll call out your names and you may ask your question to him directly. All right. So that is how it's going to be. So yes, I'll just share my screen and hand it over to Rama-san from here.
Thank you. So we are all set now, right?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So as Manasa-san was indicating, so we are called Sakura Nihongo Resource Center. So Sakura Nihongo Resource Center has been a Japanese language services company for the past 21 years. So just for an indication, Sakura means the cherry blossom flower. Nihongo is Japanese, and we deal with totally with only Japanese, Japan and Japanese. So we were founded in the year 2000 and have been delivering services to corporates and individuals the last 21 years, exclusively only into Japanese. So what all do we do for the corporates? Just to give you an indication. So we have been conducting corporate trainings, which again is customized as per the requirement of the corporate. Have been giving document translations, both Japanese to English and English to Japanese. The Japanese Business Etiquette program is a flagship program of SNRC, which in a short duration of between 1 to 2 days, we give loads of inputs to Indian employees of companies where they want to understand the basic needs to deal with Japan and Japanese. So not the language, but this talks more about the culture and business etiquette. On the other hand, I mean, before the pandemic, we used to have loads of Japanese nationals in India, the expats. So to acclimatize them with Indian culture, Indian work ethics, so that they are not much in shock, we have been conducting that too. And one of the other main services has been our bilingual placements, where we are into not any regular placement, but exclusively again, someone who knows Japanese and English with or without technical knowledge. So depending on the corporate requirement, we used to source profiles, people for them and place them. Okay. Now, not only with corporates, these are the list of corporates, few corporates whom we've been working with. So as you see, we are working with core Japanese companies, the Indian MNCs, the engineering sector, the pharmaceutical sector, banking. So across different verticals, we have been catering to Japanese language requirements for these companies. Apart from this, we have also been closely associated with the academics too. So as you can see, we have been again working with the technical colleges, the engineering colleges, and the non-technical colleges too. Even here again, it is again bifurcated as per the need of the college. Next slide. So these are organic reviews of our own students who have thought about our services and have reviewed us on Google. And as of now, we have 3 centers in Karnataka, 2 in Bangalore and 1 in Mysore. So both Malleshwaram is our core center where we have been working for the last 21 years, which has around 606 plus reviews. Kormangla started off a decade ago, and we've got so many reviews. And Mysore, we just started in 2019, and it's been going good. But now, due to the pandemic, everything is moved online. Next one, please. So what all do we do other than giving corporate services, teaching individuals Japanese? There are a lot of value add activities that we have been doing, like this Michi, where it's not only our students, but pan India, we cater to all the students who want to know or hear from the corporate speakers how Japan is, or what are the relations between India and Japan, what is the need of the hour. So like this, we've been conducting every month almost one Michi or little more than that. And we've done almost 18 plus Michis in the last 1.5 years. So all these are uploaded on our Facebook once the sessions are done and are recorded. So you can go back and listen to those eminent speakers who have shared a lot of knowledge with all of us from their experience. So apart from this, we are also tied up with few Japanese language institutions in Japan. We are their sole representatives. So any of our students who want to go to Japan for further learning their Japanese language and then down the line work there, they get benefited from us. And of course, the placement and culture orientation are imbibed into our sessions. Next one, please. So this is what I wanted to introduce SNRC about. We are very much active on social media. We keep posting a lot of very useful information on all the platforms. So you can view and follow us to keep getting further information. This is about SNRC. Now I hand it over to Mr. Ranganathan so that we listen and understand what he has to say. So all of you, enjoy your time, learn a lot, think a little differently, post his speech. Over to you, sir. Thank you very much again for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Ramasan. Thank you, Manasa-san. Thank you for the kind introduction and setting up the stage. And now I'm kind of very nervous now to make sure that I have to deliver on the promise which you have already created for the students. So welcome to everybody. Good morning. I hope you and your families are safe and doing well in these uncertain times. I think all of us at some point have gone through a little bit of personal crisis in these difficult times. But this too will pass, and I'm sure it will be a new beginning. And as Japan represents a sunrise, so I think we will have a new sunrise to wake up to in the future for all of us, which will be bright and shiny. So can you start projecting the slide, madam? Okay. So let me begin with a personal story. And actually, Ramasan madam has taken away the lightning out of my and thunder out of my speech. The first thing is, it was the first Japanese word which got ingrained into my memory is the word Sakura. There was a company which was founded in Japan in 1873, and that company was rebranding its paper products and film products. So there used to be a very cute advertisement which used to come for about 20 seconds or so in Doordarshan when I was probably in my 5th class, 6th class. So I'm talking about early 1980s. And what happened then is one small boy and one small girl will go up to a mountaintop. Okay, and they have very Japanese features as well. And then they will shout the word Sakura, and then the echo will come back as Konica. So the reason was Sakura was being rebranded as Konica by the Konica company at that point of time. Sakura were the paper products and film products, film rolls and stuff like that. So that is the first word I ever learned in Japanese language. Okay, my Japanese language skills are very limited to about 150 to 200 different words, and most of them have historical and industrial connotations, so to speak. And I have had a great fortune to be interacting with Japanese organizations and Japanese stakeholders since in my career from 1996 onwards. And I've really been, there's a lot to learn. I mean, and Japan has always been a mystery. Japan has been a very closed country, so it has always been a mystery. So finally, coming back to the story of Sakura, Sakura actually means cherry blossom, and cherry blossom viewing in Japan, cherry blossom festival is considered to be so, it's such a beautiful but such a moving experience. And now my first cherry blossom viewing festival was not in Japan but was in Los Angeles, and because Los Angeles has probably the largest population of Japanese people outside of Japan. About 70,000 Japanese people live in Los Angeles, and there's a little Tokyo as well. So there is a Japanese food festival and everything. So I was very engrossed in it. I lived and worked in Los Angeles. So that's how I got more and more exposed to Japanese culture in Los Angeles, not in Japan. And let's go to the next slide. So as I already said, welcome. And let me say that also in Japanese, Ohayo gozaimasu. Ohayo gozaimasu, and welcome to this session. First, to understand what is the landscape of Japan, you must all understand the history of Japan and the culture of Japan. And that's very, very key for you to be able to understand the current scenario of Japan as to why Japanese do things the way they are. If you look at Japan, Japan's irrigatable land is the highest in the world. It is the first in the world. Okay. Whereas India is 27th in the world. Right. So Japanese people have, from time immemorial, have always looked at how to optimize and utilize the resources which is available in a small mountainous country surrounded by sea from all sides. So that is why agriculture and fishing were the key portions of Japanese economy for a long, long time. And then Japanese, when the trading with the external world started, especially with Portuguese, British, Dutch, and Spanish people over a period of time, they felt their culture was at threat. And during the Tokugawa shogunate, for 200 plus years, Japan shut itself down to the entire external world until 1853. So they remained an island of isolation. But what happened over a period of time in Japan was they significantly made progress in terms of what they were best at and how they could assimilate all their strengths and become a nation whereby they could bring out the beauty, the sublime beauty of what is Japan, and an innate sense of belonging to the land, right? This was the key for them. And if I want to sum up Japan, their culture, whether past, present, or future, in English, I have two lines to say. Those two lines are: excellence is expected, perfection is tolerated. You guys remember this, okay? This is very, very key in Japan. Can you believe if the train was 10 seconds late, they will publish an apology in the newspaper that the train was 10 seconds late. If that is the element of perfection to which the Japanese culture in terms of work goes. Just click on, madam. So one of the first things which comes to our mind is from Japanese history is about the samurais, because and a lot of movies have been made on this, a lot of stories have been written on this. The reason why samurai has been depicted as an ideal Japanese is because of the code of honor. The code of honor, the Bushido, was so important. And again, if you look at everything about samurai, there is a key reflection of perfection. One of the first manufacturings or the industrial manufacturing product which people got to see outside Japan probably is the samurai sword, the katana. And some katanas take more than a year to manufacture, and katanas are sold for from hundreds of thousands of dollars to millions of dollars. Okay, just one sword, not much big. It's a piece of steel, but it is welded together so much times that it may have 10,000 folds of steels inside it, right? And it's one of the most sharpest sword ever to be made. You can cut a paper with it. So that is the proof of Japanese manufacturing. You will be surprised that Japanese manufacturing is so extended that you can have a chef knife, which is for $800, which means, can you believe, you're paying about 60,000 rupees to buy a knife to cut vegetables and meat. And those knives are so proudly possessed by the greatest chefs in the world as well, right? You can slice a tomato probably 0.3 or 0.4 microns thin. You can make it so transparent, and that's the sharpness of the knife and the skill with which you wield it. And everything about Japan, as I said, because they were a small country, everything they tried to bring it smaller, make it more compact, make it more perfect. And the second example, which is here on your screen, is nothing but a Japanese poetry called haiku. Haiku is a Japanese poetry, and the first time I discovered haiku was because there was a Indian sari company called Garden Vareli, and they used to make a series of saris called Haiku Collection. And I was wondering what this Haiku Collection is. And in those days, we did not have the Google. So after a lot of research, I found out that haiku is nothing but Japanese poetry, which is written in 17 syllables. 5 syllables in the first line, 7 syllables in the second line, and 5 syllables in third line. So even storytelling or poetry in Japan is compacted and miniaturized. So the idea is, how can you bring your thoughts so close in a story that you can tell that story just in 17 syllables, just in a few words. Even if you take the Japanese national anthem, the Kimigaya, it is recorded in the Guinness Book of World Records as the world's shortest national anthem. The reason for that is they want to keep it very simple, they want to keep it concise, and they want to be it compact. This could be because of geographical reasons, this could be of other reasons, but they believe is the word small is beautiful, I think comes more from the Japanese cultural perspective. Next one, please, madam. And because you see, this is an example of origami. I'm sure you most of heard the way paper folding has been taken to the next level. Okay, again, an art, again, compact and bringing essence of beauty. Look at this particular goose, which has been made out of paper. Okay, it looks so real. And all it has is pieces of folded paper. There is no wood, there is no metal. All these things are scarce in Japan. So they made the best possible use of the resources they had, and see the beauty with which it has been created. Even in their art of ikebana, which is the art of flower arrangement, so many themes are conveyed with very, very, very simple thought. And click next, madam. Okay. If you look at this, this is one example of the paradise flower, which grows very wildly. But the way it has been reflected in the ikebana art is amazingly beautiful. Go ahead, madam. And this is the art of bonsai, where they take a pine tree, and the pine tree has been pruned and pruned and pruned. And finally, they have made it into a small pine tree. This takes about 20 years to achieve, to make this. Bonsai, again, as an art, is a very fine thing. And Japan is also famous for sumo wrestling, also for manga comics. But sumo wrestling, I mean, as I said, I'm a student of Japan, and I have been trying to study Japan in various ways. And thanks to Google, internet, YouTube, and things like that, there are more and more things which I'm coming to exposure to. One of the things which I saw is a journey of a 14-year-old boy who starts training to become a sumo wrestler, and how tough it is for him to come into the ring, start fighting, also do his routine things, and eventually become the highest decorated sumo wrestler, which is the Yokozuna. And how tough it is to maintain that, what kind of injuries, what kind of sacrifices he had to make to reach to that level. That an entire beautiful journey, right? And how they achieve it in Japan. And the same is with a geisha. Okay, how somebody becomes a maiko. What does a young girl undergo to sacrifice and to make a mark in the industry, in the entertainment industry, and become a geisha? And last but not the least is the food industry in Japan. If you look at I mean, there is nothing like a warm sake to drink when in a winter cold night. And I used to wonder once upon a time that how people would eat raw fish. What kind of a taste does raw fish have? But over a period of time, I become a major fan of sushi, because once you start understanding the cultural aspect of eating really fresh, okay, you will realize that fresh fish is very different than what is usually served today. And very importantly, this is a culture. I mean, no culture in the world celebrates eating something dangerous. And this is one culture which does that. For example, there's a fish called fugu. It's called the puffer fish. It's the world's most poisonous fish. And a sashimi is made out of fugu. You are required to be a licensed cook, and probably there are about 27 licensed chefs who can prepare fugu in Japan. So, and it's one of the most expensive dishes to eat in the world. So, and it's a poison fish. There's a chance that you can eat and you can die, right? So that's why there is a Japanese haiku poem which is written about fugu. It says, if you eat fugu, you're a fool, and if you don't eat fugu, you're a fool, because I believe the taste compensates for the risk of death. This is a very unique culture. This is a culture which has evolved from closed doors to an open. And even when they emerged into manufacturing sector, which was in late 1850s, and as I said, Konica was set up in 1873. Imagine somebody setting up a photographic factory in 1873, okay, in Japan, after being close to the world for so long. And imagine when photography as an industry started in India, right? Even though we were under British, nobody took so much serious interest in photography or whatever it is. And then Japanese made leaps and bounds in manufacturing. I think they look at steel industry or railroad or infrastructure building, electricity, or even the lead up to the Second World War. Okay, their manufacturing was at the peak before the Second World War when they got into Second World War. And what differentiates the Japanese manufacturing or the Japanese industry as such is they have always looked to nature to look at innovation. They have tried to integrate their manufacturing within the natural way. And that is how Japanese products have achieved the greatest heights in manufacturing excellence. Okay. And their designs are also so innovative. As I said, they keep in line with nature. For example, the designer of the electric locomotive for the bullet train, he's been inspired by penguins and eagles because he was a bird watcher. So if you look at how the electric connection happens between the locomotive engine as well as the electric line overline, that traction device is designed basis how the penguin slides on water and how eagle takes off in air. So these two things are combined to form that particular traction. So it is like they have built their entire manufacturing around the nature. For example, there has not been a single bullet train accident since the time it was incepted in the time during the Tokyo Olympics of 1960. They have a fail-proof mechanism to make sure that all the trains come to a stop as soon as there is an earthquake detection, because Japan is plagued with a number of earthquakes. Probably it's the most earthquake hit country in the world. Despite this, how could they achieve, with complete destruction of 2 atom bombs, the only country to ever have 2 atom bomb hits in the history of the world, and how could they manage to survive from that devastation place and come and become excellent? It is because it is their culture to be always be excellent, and it is their culture to apologize. It's their culture to work as a team. There are so much things, and added to that, it's a completely hierarchical society, whether it is the society of Japan, whether it's the industrial society, whether it's the corporate hierarchy. It's a completely hierarchical system of life, and that actually makes Japan one of the very strongest way, because they have the best of culture, the best of work ethic, the best hierarchical system which nobody will break, whatever happens. Okay, and because they're so bound by the rules, the best of the individual and the best of the team comes forth, and that's what makes Japanese manufacturing, Japanese industry best in whatever sector they are doing. Can you name one bad Japanese product? Can you name one Japanese company? You will not be able to, because that's not a possibility at all. Okay, so my first Japanese product was a very famous Japanese export in those days, and it was called the Walkman, the Sony Walkman, where it was a tape recorder which you could put your cassette and listen. You could plug it into your pant and you could walk around. It was the most stylish accessory an 18-year-old boy could have when I was growing up. And it was what? It was the miniature tape recorder. It was the ultimate iPod of the era of that particular point of time. It was so convenient. It was not even like, it was less than 300 grams, and you could carry it and you could listen to about 200 songs before the batteries ran out. So it was the most beautiful thing to have, of course. And the beauty of the Japanese manufacturing or innovation in any field is that they will innovate something, and that innovation will run for some years. By the time other people get smart and start copying it, they have already moved on to the other innovation. So by the time Walkman was started to be duplicated by other companies, Sony had moved on to do other things. Okay, the same thing if you look at the Toyota Corporation, if you look at Nissan, where I had the proud privilege of working in Nissan. If you look at Honda, if you look at Suzuki, if you look at Daikin, if you look at Mitsubishi, all these large organizations, if you look at SoftBank, if you look at any Japanese corporation which has global presence, they are in the business of innovation. They are not in the business of manufacturing and selling, but they're all in the business of innovation, making things better every time. And when they make it better, the one beautiful concept comes into mind. They look at eliminating waste, which is muda, which is a very beautiful Japanese concept to say elimination of muda, which is elimination of waste, makes the production more efficient. There is something called a concept in manufacturing called just in time. That means it is just in that right time all the components come together to the factory so that you can assemble the product and sell it off, rather than you holding stocks of a lot of inventory and wasting space and time and energy and money in managing that, and also paying for it early on. So just in time is a concept which was there, which came because of the excellence in Japanese manufacturing. The other day we were discussing what do you call it as we had to make two kinds of two people were supposed to make a presentation in my office, and I was one of them, and my boss was the other one of them. We were both supposed to submit our both two proposals to our super boss. So my boss submitted his proposal about 6 hours before the presentation, so that my super boss will have time to review it and whatnot. I submitted about 20 minutes before the presentation. So as usual, my boss said, I like Rama's way of presenting things because he was just in time. So I did not say anything because I was already feeling very bad about it. So he said, my boss said, Rama has imbibed the Japanese way of looking at it in just in time. So I said, I have a very Indian take on this. I said, I do it somehow in time, which is like the shit part of it. so I'm trying to improve on just in time is what I said. So both of us laughed and we left it at that. But I think that's the beauty of Japanese management. The discipline is so intense. It is unbeatable. I think they will never leave anything to chance. The entire manufacturing concept of Kaizen itself is a beautiful concept to adapt in industrial as well as in process settings. I use Kaizen in financial process mapping as well. It's such a beautiful concept. But one thing which I want to give credit to all of you who have joined today, I think you personally have embraced the Japanese concept of Ikigai, which means you know what you want to be in your being, the way you want to be happy, or what you decides the future course. So these are all, I tell you one thing, Japan has not only given the world methods of manufacturing or to run a labor force or to be efficient, but they have also given certain things to world which makes us more better, beautiful in smaller things we have. If you look at the Japanese national policy on forest management, they believe that they should not exploit their forests for any natural purposes, any purposes for commercial purposes at all. So all their forests are protected. So they have a strict rule against even cutting down one tree. Whereas, if they want wood, they will import it from a country which has surplus wood. But they are not going to cut down their forest because they want to use wood. So they had 50 nuclear power plants. About 30% of their energy needs used to come from nuclear power plants. But now they are rethinking that strategy. They've shut down most of them, and they are becoming nuclear free. Second World War taught them a very important lesson. They said, you are small in size, you have limited resources, don't have political ambitions of dominating the world in a political or a military way. So they chose the next best thing. Now they've become the dominant economic power in the world without raising a gun, without shooting a bullet. Everybody in the world is some way or the other has a trade deficit with Japan. Everybody owes money to Japan in some way or the other. And all this they've been able to achieve in just a span of 80 years after the Second World War. Even if you look at innovations, I mean, I'm sure most of you have heard about ramen noodles. Okay, the ramen noodles itself was an innovation born by Japanese engineer who said, "Oh my God, during wartime we don't have things, but we prefer to eat noodles. How do we do this? We are not able to grow rice." And so he invented this instant form of pre-cooked noodles so that you can take it in a bowl and go. But if you go to Japan again, if you want to eat a bowl of ramen noodles, there are thousands of people who do ramen noodles, and each one of them specializes it. And actually, I saw a documentary of a ramen noodle shop owner. He starts his day at about 3 o'clock in the morning, and he ends his day at about 9:30 in the night. Okay, so he starts from prepping, cleaning last night to the end of the day, next night, shopping, everything. And customer satisfaction is the key thing which drives him. And you'll realize in Japan, nobody takes a tip. If you are a waiter in a restaurant or you're a taxi driver, they don't believe in tips because they all believe in that simple concept that they're doing their job and they're supposed to do it very well. And another important thing, if you look at innovation in Japanese innovation, today we are able to all buy pearls for our mothers, sisters, wives, girlfriends, whatnot, because this is again because of Japanese innovation. Because it was a Japanese gentleman who conceptualized cultured pearl cultivation. Previously, pearls were all natural, and natural pearls means somebody had to dive deep into the ocean. And natural pearls today are probably 0.001% of the trade in the entire pearl industry today. 99.99% of the business has moved to cultured pearls. But it was again the innovation of Japanese. Of course, now today, the largest cultured pearl manufacturer is Japan, China, followed by Korea. So again, as I said, Japanese invented it, exploited it for some time, and then they moved on to do the next best innovation. I think that's the key of the Japanese industry as such. Can we go to the next slide, madam? So here is why my question to all of you of to say, you have to understand Japan and you have to understand yourself if you want to do something in Japan, because these two things are very, very key for your success. If you only understand Japan, then you will be overwhelmed with the size of Japan or the length and breadth of things which they do in Japan, right? And if you only understand you, then you will never be able to make the opportunity to meet the availability. It is like this: Japan is an opportunity and you are the availability. So how do you match your availability to Japan's opportunity? And that is why you need to understand Japan very well, and you need to understand you better. I think as students, what you should do is, one, I think you have taken the brightest step. See, in my long years of experience and recruiting so many people, right from campus freshers to experienced people, there are two things which I always tell people when it comes to hiring people. And if you're a potential candidate for a job, there are two ways you can get the job. One is by beating the competition. By beating the competition. First way, you have to beat the competition. The second way is to avoid the competition. So I always tell these people, a hardworking man solves a problem. A wise man does not get into the problem itself. Okay. So of all of you today who are looking and aspiring for a job, you are all engineers, and you have chosen to see that you want to get a job in the Japanese industry in some way, and you have already started learning the Japanese language, then you are already in the second lot. That is, you are trying to get the job by avoiding competition. Okay, congratulations on that. Very, very well done. Now let me explain what is beating the competition and avoiding the competition. Beating the competition is, let us say you are you are an idli seller, and there are 100 idli sellers in the same street, or you are a vada pav maker. There are 100 vada pav guys in the same street. Or let us assume that you make porridge, chole puri if you're from the north. You know, there are 100 people who are making chole puri on the same street. So if you're in south of India, don't compete with because you have to be the best of the 100 idlis for somebody to buy idli from you. You have to be the best of the 100 vada pav players for somebody to buy vada pav from you. And you have to be the best chole puri guy in the hundreds of people to buy somebody to buy from you. So what you have done is you've chosen a different route. Where everybody is selling idlis, you are making vadas. Where everybody is selling vada paos, okay, you are making shrikhand. Where everybody is making puri chole, you are making halwa. So automatically people are going to come to you because you are one of the unique people already. You will be surprised that there are not more than 30,000 Indians working in Japan, out of which 1,000 of them are possibly employed as chefs in restaurant industry. About 4 or 5,000 of them are in the handicraft jewelry industry, predominantly Jains and these things. But rest of them mostly are in IT sector in Japan at this point of time. And India and Japan have had, I would like to draw upon three large examples of connections, so to speak, I would say. Now, the first connection is Buddhism. So we exported Buddhism in a way to Japan, and Japan follows to an extent. Considerable amount of people have Zen Buddhism as their belief system. The second big industrial connection I would like to make is way back in early 1900s, late 1800s is when Indian global giant and Indian origin Tatas have had their trading posts in Kobe from that particular point of time. In some 1890s onwards, they are having continuous presence in Japan. The third and the very important patriotic feeling connection is Subhash Chandra Bose and Indian National Army supported by Japan. So we do have certain historical ties with Japan. I forget the name of the gentleman. There was one Indian doctor who has worked and saved a lot of Japanese lives, and his statue is actually erected in Japan. That man is not even known in India, but he is respected in Japan because he was he was there as a judge when Japanese prisoners were being prosecuted for Second World War crimes and things like that. So he is very well regarded as an Indian justice man in Japan. So we do have a lot of cultural connections. We are both hardworking people, but their job ethics is completely different. So you must understand that. And here, when I look at opportunities, I would say, if you're a mechanical engineer, if you're a civil engineer, if you're a chemical engineer, if you're an electronics engineer, if you're a computer science engineer, all of these engineering fields have a scope to work in Japan. Okay, because if I take the top 100 companies of Japan, out of which at least 50 of them are in the Fortune 500 list, all of them are into these diverse industries. Okay, and opportunities exist. And first thing you must really look at it is and say, hey, are we looking at you to be going away to Japan in the next couple of months? Answer is no. You may start working right now. A friend of mine has actually joined as a head of Toyota Financial Services in Bangalore. So the idea is that you will start with visits to Japan. You will get assimilated with Japan, and over a period of time, seniority is a very respected thing in Japan, in Japanese industry. So don't expect you to be. Nobody's going to give you a work visa like they do in America and take you to Japan immediately. You have to show your potential, you have to show your prowess, and you have to prove yourself. And that is when you will eventually get relocated to Japan and work as an expat in Japan, because that is a very pricey position. Japan is one of those few countries which does not give citizenship to everybody. Even if you stay for 50 years, there's no possibility that you'll get citizenship, because they're very tight about their this thing. And I found in my experience, Japanese companies will never pay you in US dollars. They will only pay you in Japanese yen. Even if there's a fluctuation rates are high, even if they end up paying 2-3% more because of foreign exchange fluctuation, they don't care. They are a people with great amount of national pride as such. Let's go to the next slide, madam. So as I said, if you're an engineer, and these are the big industries which I could look at, right? Where there are opportunities. And if you look at any of these companies, I mean, the most recent one I would say, I would start to the bottom, is Mitsubishi actually acquired a portion of a Canadian company called Bombardier, which is the third largest aircraft manufacturer in the world after Boeing and Airbus. So now they are also deep into aerospace as well, like Mitsubishi. Or I mean, if you look at Fanuc had a joint venture with General Electric, and Fanuc is now more into artificial intelligence and robotics as well. Of course, there is IT, there is electronic giants. Like the key of electronics in Japan is about miniaturization. How do you make smaller and more efficient circuits? If you look at any of these particular industries which are there, shipbuilding, I definitely want to quote a big example here. So Japan made a submarine in 1940s. You can go and look it up on Google. There is even a 1 hour documentary on it. It is called Sentoku, or it is called the I-101-404, which is the Japanese number for it. But Sentoku is the right word for it, to look at it. It was the world's first submarine, which was also an aircraft carrier. So what you would do is, it was like the nuclear powered submarine with missile capability, what you have today. And they did this in 1943, mind you. So the submarine can carry 3 planes, and the submarine would surface, the planes will be launched, the planes would go drop bombs wherever they had to, the plane will come and land again. There's a small crane which will pick up the plane and put it back into the submarine, and the submarine will go underwater and disappear. So nobody knows where the planes came from and bombed, literally, because all this would happen in about 35 minutes, right? So by the time you discover where the planes came from and where they went, you will never know. And imagine the scariness that suddenly, somewhere, from somewhere, some planes are coming, they're bombing a place and they're going away. So that was the kind of innovative things these guys could think of and they could build. And until I think 1968, 69, they could not build a bigger submarine than that. The world could not build a bigger submarine than that. And the submarines which they had built in the Second World War, actually they were destroyed by America because they don't want the technology to fall in the hands of Russia. These Japanese were surrendered to America, but they destroyed them because they didn't want the technology to fall in the hands of other people because they were so advanced. And we used to joke when we were growing up. We said, no, this Kawasaki Bajaj motorcycle was there. If the Japanese had not been what do you call it, as neutral in their military approach, they can make fighter aircrafts which are smaller than Kawasaki motorcycles, is what we used to think. So that is the miniaturization in every industry, what they have done, be it robotics, be it electronics, be it the sleekness of electronic devices, the gaming consoles in entertainment and media industry. Amazing. I mean, if you look at their chemical pharmaceutical industry, also beautiful. And automobile manufacturing, there are tons and tons of examples which we can give. See, and Japanese engineering is flawless. Okay, it will not break down at all. The difference between Japanese engineering and German engineering is much more expensive. Okay, but Japanese engineering is it's cheaper as compared to German engineering, but at the quality parameters, it is always definitely better, I would say. Because if you look at, see, we Indian people, there is an advertisement which you would have seen on TV also. So there is a different models of car, and somebody says, "Kitni deti hai liter mein?" How much petrol will it consume? So we are very prudent people, right? Even if we are rich, we will not throw money. Indians, we are very careful and judicious in our use. So if you look at the expat population in US, okay, 99% of them will have Japanese cars, luxury Japanese cars. Okay, only very few people will have Mercedes-Benz, BMW, or Audi, because we believe even if we spend money, we should get the best of luxury and best of quality. So that is why I think as Indians, we tend to go more towards Japanese goods than anything else. And one more thing is that we should look at this. This may be the last generation of people who will learn Japanese, because there is already a device. If you speak to it in English, it will translate into Japanese. For example, I saw the demo of this piece. It says, if you walk into a hotel and say, "Can you give me a hotel room with a view?" It will immediately translate it in Japanese as soon as it listens. So there is an AI-based engine which has come. So you can go and sit in a taxi and say, "I want to go to Kyoto," and it will translate it in Japanese to the driver. You could go to a railway station and say, "Where do I buy the tickets to go to Nagoya?" And it will translate immediately. So this is the first level where the human's voice interface is built. The second level of interface is that as soon as there is a QR code and you punch something in English, and it will read the QR code, it will read the translation, it will give you support in English as well. So maybe you and your generation will be the last generation to learn Japanese formally. Of course, learning culture, etiquette, and things like that, machines can't teach you. There will still be a human element to it. But maybe interacting with Japanese uh, people as a culture will become more easier for us as we go by. Second thing is Japanese research. Okay, hats off to Japanese research. Really, the way they research into and what all they research into is really, really amazing. Really, really amazing. I mean, it's mind blowing. You will not believe it. The Japanese emperor who abdicated, Emperor Akito, or he was a published scientist in ethology on marine biology. Okay, so perfection, if it doesn't matter whether you're an emperor or you're not an emperor, every aspect of Japanese life strives. If you should see, there's a documentary, I think, how school children, they have lunch and they clean up their canteen, and how they segregate the food, how they distribute the tasks among themselves, how they serve each other food in canteen. You should see how the bullet trains are cleaned and what is the rate at which they clean. So there is everything to be learned in the Japanese culture, from the smallest to the biggest thing possible. And you should see, even if they take hobbies like fishing, how critical. There is a tenkura fishing, which is catching very small fish by a fishing line. To make the fish hook itself, it's an art. So they are there in every aspect. And as I said, if you're going to be an engineer or you're a software engineer, there are tons of things for you to do. And all these companies like NTT in telecom, Nissan Telegraph and Telephone. In banking and insurance, you have a lot more organizations from SoftBank onwards. Okay, we know talked about electronics as well. So the opportunities are immense. And as I said about research, if you want to pursue your research, your PhDs in a Japanese organization, in a Japanese university, that's also furthermore beautiful to do. One thing of caution is integration into Japanese culture is a little difficult when you move to Japan. It will take time. It will take time. I have a friend, when I set up Jasdik Park, long back in 97, one of the guys who went from here was a guy called Senthil, and his daughter is actually named as Oshin. So her name is now Oshin Subramaniam Senthil. So she is almost Japanese to that extent, because she was born there and she was raised there. But it's a great culture to assimilate to, and there are great opportunities. And because there are, I mean, like probably about 100 of you are there in the session today. If I take across India, there may not be even 10,000 Japanese learners. And I've heard this many more times. Japanese is one of the easiest language to forget. So you have to intensively learn this language, because you can't learn this because the entire gamut of hiragana, katakana, kanji, it's not so easy. So I keep telling people, when I retire, maybe I will take up Japanese as a hobby, because I don't have the focus at this point of time to learn. And one day maybe I will sit down and read Yoshuri Shimbun in a very relaxed way. Because for you to read a Japanese newspaper, you need to know 5,000 characters at least to be able to fluently read a newspaper. English is so easy, with phonetics and 26 alphabets, you can master the language so easily, but that's not the case with Japanese. I think that's one of the key things of Japan is it's so tough from the outside, but you have to get in to see it is like an egg. The shell is tough, but inside is soft. So you guys have to break through that shell. That will take tremendous amount of energy and enthusiasm and constant discipline. And these are the same things which you bring to the Japanese workforce as well. When you become a Japanese employee in a Japanese organization, this is what is expected out of you. And everybody in Japan does this, right? If you look at typical Japanese working days, they're easily 10 to 12 hours. So you should look at, if you look at Japanese way of life, they work hard, they party harder. And they don't let go on that second part of partying harder, but they really, really work hard. That's the key to the Japanese success, and they work as a team. It is always that the team should win rather than individual winning. I think that's a very, even if you look at Indian cricket team, sometimes I'm very surprised, either you have an MS Dhoni or Virendra Sehwag, or you have a Virat Kohli, or you have what do you call it, Sachin Tendulkar. We are dependent upon individuals. But if you look at Japan, they're always a team. They're always a team. Team Japan is the winner. You will see very few people who are individually, independently famous in Japan, for the simple reason that it's all collective. Even when they do a strike, it is so organized. And once they do the strike, there is no damage to public property. If people have been eating, drinking, the strike makers will clean the street. The football fans will clean the stadium before they leave. right? So these cultural aspects is what makes that country great. And if you want to be in that culture, you have to assimilate those aspects into your life. Otherwise, it's difficult. You can't be like, I will be like, हाँ चलता है जाता है type. That was said, no? Precision, accuracy, it's very important. Punctuality. Like in India, if you say 10:30, people will turn up at 11:45. Okay, and they'll say abhi aata hu, which means when they'll say abhi aata hu, it can mean 2 hours from now also. It never means next 5 minutes. So Japan is not like that. As I said, if the train is delayed by 10 seconds, the company publishes an apology for 10 seconds, right? So that is the cultural shift for us Indians. I think that is the biggest thing which we need to make to be able to assimilate and work very closely with Japanese companies. They're so perfect. They're so respectful. I mean, this is another thing which I learned in the corporate world, that you will always address somebody with their name, and you will put the address as Sam. So everybody calls me. If somebody calls me, they will call me Bharatwaj-san. I will say Oyoto-san. I will say, that san means it is the Hindi equivalent of G, or a Kannada equivalent of what do you call it, as Neevu, or Aap is the Urdu equivalent for this. That respect is also there. So there is respect, there is honor, there is precision, perfection, passion to do the right thing, excellence in everything they do. These are some of the attributes. If you take this, even if you don't know the Japanese language, it doesn't matter. Innovation, creativity, if you bring all this to the table, you will be a very successful person in a Japanese company. Okay, language you can always learn, but if you bring these attributes, you will be perfect. And if you know the Japanese language, nothing like it. Next slide, madam. So as I was explaining before, the key to success is understanding Japanese culture and history, knowing the Japanese language, and imbibing the Japanese ethics. If you put these three things together, this is the takeaways. If you have these three things, okay, then you will make it in a Japanese corporation. You will be surprised that today there is also an Indian origin person who is a Japanese city councillor. That could have not been possible 25 years ago. So Indians are making their mark in Japan, even though our population of Indian origin people is very, very low in Japan. But there is a possibility. That's a growing population. And I'm sure all of you will also be able to make a mark in Japan in your own way, or on the Japanese economy in your own way. And I would like to end today's talk with a word which was usually reserved for Japanese emperors. The word is banzai, which means may you live for 10,000 years, or may you see the 10,000 suns. So my goal for you is that may you see prosperous and prosperous sunrises with respect to Japan in your life. With that, minasan, arigato gozaimasu.
Thank you very much, sir. It was great.
So I'm open to taking questions. I think we have very little time, but I can take questions.
Sure, sir. So over to all of you. You can raise your, I think we've already got some 2 participants. Vaishnavi sir. Sir, can you please give some information about the scope of artificial intelligence in Japan?
Okay. So artificial intelligence is a very key thing which is being developed. I mean, Japan is a pioneer in robotics. As I told, I gave you an example of artificial intelligence in my talk itself. Because Japan is a very closed society, and because also their population is aging, they are bringing in a lot of artificial intelligence to make sure that their labor problems are addressed. One of them thing would be, let us say they take last 20 years of weather developments and they put it into an artificial intelligence engine, and automatically lights will be on, switch off, electricity will be turned in, turned off, air conditioning, heating, all these things. Because if you're an old person, life expectancy in today's Japan is 85 years. So they don't want old people to move around, switch on fans, switch on lights, switch on air conditioning. So artificial intelligence is having a lot of potential in a country like Japan, and they are willing to invest in it as well. That's a very key thing, right? Countries which want to do artificial intelligence but don't have enough levels of investment, like for example India, we are struggling with doing it. So there is a lot of research and job opportunities in the scope of artificial intelligence in Japan, because they want to put as much as of it is possible, because they want to do away with the labor force because of their aging population. Piping design engineer in EPC companies in Japan. I mean, I think Ashutosh, that is a very, very specific question. But as I said, there is no dearth of design engineers and acceptance. The reason for that is very simple. That the Japanese people have always prouded themselves with great design abilities, so they will always appreciate people who bring in great design as well as what do you call it, as creativity to the job. So there is an opportunity, definitely. Oh yeah, environmental, fantastic question, Abhishek. Environmental engineering in Japan is very key. I think they strive to protect the environment as much as possible. Incidentally, there is one gentleman who actually learned how to. I mean, if you go to YouTube and Google how to build a forest in 5 years or something like that, you'll get a TED talk. Actually, he learned that entire technique from the Toyota Corporation. So there's a lot which is there in what do you call it, as environmental engineering as a scope in Japan, and there's a lot to learn as well. If you want to go and study environmental engineering in Japan, also there's a lot of scope. What about can you discuss how to get into top universities in Japan and masters in engineering, and how do I get accepted? I think this will call for a personal research. I don't see your name, VM. The reason for it is I don't know the branch, and there are definitely some evolved areas for you to get into in master's program in Japan. But one of the key things is absolute fluency in Japanese. I think that's something which you have to focus on before even you try to do that. Second thing is you will actually even change your name if from something to a Japanese name. Most of the students in Japan, when they go, you take up a Japanese name as well. Heard of people going for internships in Japan and Indian engineering student. Are there any chances to apply off-campus internship in MT sector? Right now, because of COVID, I think physical internships are not happening. But I would suggest that if you're seriously interested in Japan, try for an internship within India in a Japanese company or an Indo-Japanese the idea is Japan has been in forefront of media and entertainment industry for a long time, starting from Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai. But they're there, like what design and game design is extremely very well done on the systems part. They are very, very in the front forward of it. I think, and they're also addicted to video games a lot. Japan, so it's a captive market, but I think their gaming market is probably about $10 billion plus. So there are definitely a lot of opportunities in this industry, but the fact remains that again, it is super creative as an industry, you understand. So that is the edge you need to take with. Is it possible to get a job in IT sector as a fresher? Yes, it is possible. Actually, when I used to be in an organization, we actually started a program called Little Japan, where we used to train freshers for 4 hours in software courses and 4 hours in Japanese. And we specifically made sure that they would work with Japanese customers so that they would be on short-term assignments in Japan for like 4 months, 6 months, like that. But we didn't place them permanently in Japan because it will be very, very difficult. And of course, we had a Japanese senior to take care of them who was from Japan. And I see this very, what do you call it, as a lot Maharashtrian names which are popping up. When in 1990s also, when I saw this, Maharashtrians were in the forefront of learning Japanese then as well. And I see that now also. I think Pune was a hub of learning Japanese in those days. Maybe it is still is. So I'm very happy. Any last question before I think we are already 2 minutes over. Ramasan, are you okay? Can we do?
Yeah, we can take what are the opportunities in the energy sector.
Okay.
Maybe another 2-3 questions. Sir.
Yeah. 10 years experience in Japanese IT industry and learning Japanese L5 course. How the opportunities in IT industry? So they are very good actually. the IT sector opportunities, but the clients are very. I mean, I have worked for some major Indian software companies. If you are going to be in the IT sector of a manufacturing company, your chances of going to Japan are much more faster. But if you are working for large IT companies, it is a little difficult because IT is not something which they import very easily. If it is unless in a very niche skill set, which is like artificial intelligence or machine learning or algorithm building and stuff like that, that is what is the most in demand at this point of time. I think I answered the question on creative industry and filmmaking. Uh, INR versus yen comparison. I think Anmol, you can just Google it. It's not a very big difference, right? I think yen is around 110 to a dollar. So a dollar is like 70 rupees. So it doesn't matter really, but you need to earn a lot of yens to be in Japan. Um, what about biomedical sector? So yes, this is a very evolved industry already, Ridesh, in Japan. So you can only go there to learn possibly, because if you look at the life expectancy of Japan, they have taken it from 36 years to 84 years in last 80 years. Okay, they have improved their fertility rate also because of the lowering population from 1.4 to 1.8. But I think the biggest problem the Japanese as a company, I mean, as a organization, sorry, as a country and as a government they're facing is they are not able to get people married so that they can have children to make sure that their rates are better. Japanese start their own business in other countries. Do they have a same Japanese working culture in the country, or do they adapt? They do adapt to a certain extent, uh, Varad, but they are largely put onto their own culture. Like Ramasan was telling, they are shocked sometimes with Indian work ethics. Really, because they're scared actually. So they still believe in running a very tight ship, because see, the culture is what gives them the edge in manufacturing and in business and stuff like that, right? So they don't want to dilute it to local. So if it is the Toyota Corporation in India or is it a Toyota Corporation in Nigeria, they will still have the same work ethic, and they will still have, yeah, they will, for example, they will give you your local holidays. They will adapt to a certain extent and on the cultural aspects of it. But the organizational culture, they will be accommodative of your culture in terms of your holidays, your understanding. Like, for example, they may not give 10 days leave if somebody dies in Japan, if your relative dies in Japan, but they will give you 10 days leave in India. They're sensitive to your culture, but they may not change their culture to that extent that it will become Indian culture, Indian company. They will still want to be a Japanese organization in India. And MBA graduates in demand in Japan. Yes, this is possible if you're an MBA graduate in financial sector, insurance sector, and other aspects of it, or in banking. But having said that, the entry point will be difficult because you're competing with Japanese MBAs with Japanese speaking skills, right? So you have to find yourself. You have to take to that avoiding methodology of getting the job. So what is that which is very unique you bring to the table will be the question. What about design sector for mechanical engineering? Oh, tremendous amount of scope, Saurabh, for design sector and mechanical engineering. As I said, their aspects of design engineering is completely based off what is nature, what is the most optimal one. Definitely, it can be there. This thing. Oh, Aditi, it could be difficult for me to say that which companies will give jobs to mechanical engineering with a fresher, especially in the Japanese field. It will purely depend upon, I can name 10 companies which would possibly be interesting. But having said that, it would depend upon the supply demand and their requirement to take freshers at that point of time. So I don't want to give out a reputational name, and then if they don't hire anybody, it'll be a bad thing for me and them. So that's why. But I think it's a lookout process with slow slow and process oriented work culture at Japanese. How easy is it to meet with fast moving technologies? I am really sorry. I think you must be a Dipanjan Deb. Uh, uh, the Japanese work culture is not slow, but they're definitely process oriented. They're extremely agile. If they're not agile, they cannot bring innovations as products into the marketplace. This is so untrue. They are extremely fast paced in their approach to manufacturing. They may take time in design because they want the design to be perfect. but their manufacturing will make up for the time. That is my opinion and my experience so far. Thank you, everyone. I think that that was very
I think we
interactive.
should stop with this.
Yeah.
It was good number of questions people have asked, and Bharadwaj San has also taken a lot of time to explain. So I hope now you've got a real good insight from history to the leading technology to the market now, and mainly about the Japanese culture and business etiquette. So he's given a huge amount of information in this small, no, less than an hour talk, I would say. So thank you very much, sir, and thanks one and all for joining us today. I think Manasa-san, you can do the vote of thanks, and we will conclude with that.
So thank you so much, Bharadwaj-san, for all that you've shared. It was personally, being a young person, it was very, very interesting for me, and about all that you spoke. And I hope it was the same for all the participants as well. And I hope you've all taken back all the information that he shared with you. That will definitely be really helpful for all of you. And yes, so on the WhatsApp group, we've shared a small link, a feedback form. Please do fill it up. And we have also shared a few links about our social media. So you can like, follow, share, subscribe, anything to get updates about our activities. Everything will be uploaded. So you will get details and information about more such webinars where you can participate. So yes. So I once again thank all
In
of
case
you.
any of your friends have missed it, I think by Monday we should be uploading this, so they
Yes.
can surely benefit out of this. Most probably by Monday or Tuesday, we will be uploading this on our Facebook page.
Thank you, everyone, and you have a great afternoon and fantastic weekend for you guys. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yes. So thank you, everyone. So with this, we come to the end of today's session.